Hello everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews. Today we're doing another Hong Kong review, of course, deep diving more into the Shaw Brothers library and a return for the one-armed swordsman, literally. This is the Dragon Dynasty DVD Region 1 edition. It's a pretty standard release, no kind of extras or anything, just the bare bones, kind of just the movie itself. A pretty easy one to find. I'll quickly show you it now because there really isn't much to show on this. But for anyone that's curious about it, yeah, the return for the one-armed swordsman, a series that I've kind of got myself sucked into, kind of this saga of movies do it in terms of remakes, inspired sequels, kind of thing, spiritual sequels, crossover collaborations. There's so much about this kind of series of movies kind of thing, and the character of the one-armed swordsman, the idea of the one-armed swordsman that seems to have imprinted into kind of Hong Kong cinema, being inspired from other movies in general as well that I've mentioned in my previous video. So let's deep dive and talk more about the return of the one-armed swordsman. The Return of the One-Armed Swordsman was released in 1969, directed by Chan Shea, did the first movie, and also did the third entry of the series, kind of completing his kind of mini trilogy, a sort of spiritual sequel but soft reboot at the same time. Also returning is Jimmy Wang is the One-Armed Swordsman, the infamous One-Armed Swordsman, who was his last kind of big collaboration with the director and also with Shaw Brothers Studios, who went on to do his own kind of production company and making his own movies with the One-Armed Boxer and the Chinese Boxer, and even did a couple of kind of spin-off non-related movies of the One-Armed Swordsman later on down his line, a lot of sequels to his movies or kind of sequels to other kind of movies that were popular during the time. Even his kind of Flying Guillotine type thing, did his own kind of version of that, tying into the One-Armed Boxer. Very interesting kind of actor, fighter, director, producer kind of thing. Just a really kind of interesting guy in general. Both the director and the star of this movie have gone on to do some really fantastic movies. As gathered, the first movie was an absolutely huge success and a big influencer for kind of not just Bruce Lee's kind of career later on with the late 70s, but also impacting not only the director but also Jimmy Wang Yu's career. Both eventually leaving Shaw Brothers and making their own kind of bigger movies and really kind of showing off their talents, not only as directors but also as performers, and just kind of really dominating in the kind of late 60s, kind of early 70s kind of Hong Kong cinema. And it's really fascinating to kind of see the kind of history and kind of piecing together, kind of think, oh, okay, so this movie didn't happen, then we wouldn't have got that reference or that type of story later on. But it's interesting to see the kind of evolution and kind of see what the people have taken from these in a sense. There's so many different types of iterations or kind of reimaginings. Obviously it's kind of degraded a little bit over time. Cheaper kind of straight to DVD type of movies, kind of thing that Jimmy Wang Yu was involved with, unfortunately. I think One-Armed Swordsman versus the Nine Ninjas and the One-Armed Swordsman is meant to be one of the weaker entries of the series and doesn't follow on from these first two movies, or even as a remake, Troy Hawk the Blade kind of thing. There's so many movies and so many different entries in this series that I'm very interested to see kind of all of them as much as possible if I can get access to. So this is going to be a very interesting kind of series of movies to kind of explore over the next kind of couple of weeks in a sense. So as far as a sequel goes, how do you do more of that story? Obviously by the end of the first movie he's a farmer, he's kind of given up that life and doing the whole legacy vibe and doing the whole kind of the one that you can't mess with kind of thing, the badass who lives away, who's kind of casted himself away, he's retired, he's no longer the one-armed swordsman, he hasn't done this in a long time, he's just a simple farmer with his wife living his days, and he gets drawn back in. And the film does not mess around. It's a 2-hour movie and the film jumps straight into the meat of the story, meat of the action, and this film has so much story and so much action going on in the film. It's quite impressive to say the least. It's definitely a really worthy follow-up from the first movie. This film is a good balance between heavy story kind of thing with the one-armed swordsman and the kind of the other clans that's going on during the film, and the kind of the idea of fighting for your honor and fighting for who you are, but what the cost of that is, versus non-stop, glorious kind of vicious bloodshed swordplay, villainous characters that spawn this entire movie. This has so many goddamn villains, it's unbelievable. The film basically plot-wise is that there's a new kind of series of clans that's kind of going around kind of thing, Hong Kong, and they want to find the best swordsman ever, the sword king, and they basically want to find the best. They're kind of challenging every other clan out there. If you're not going to challenge me, if you're not going to take me on, then you need to sacrifice your arm as kind of payment as you cannot be a swordsman kind of thing. We want to be the best. If you're not going to challenge us, if you're not going to at least attempt to defend your honor in that sense, then chop up your arm and you know, you can be about your days kind of thing, which I think is an interesting kind of concept. And the opening of the film is that, you know, this one swordsman kind of gets invited to this kind of tournament in a sense kind of thing. It happens during the kind of first portion of the film. He refuses. He's a simple farmer. He doesn't want anything to do with that anymore, kind of thing. But he's alert. He's on edge. He's been practicing. He definitely has got the skill set still. He's definitely a lot more badass in this film than he was in the first one. I think this one he is definitely a lot more over the top in his kind of fighting styles, and his kind of skill sets are definitely more upraised to a level 11 in this one, which I think is a lot more funnier and definitely is a lot more entertaining. I think all the scenes with him in the early portion of the film I think is really good, and he definitely makes himself and his presence really well known and loud and clear, and both want to recruit him, both want to, you know, have his assistance because he is the infamous and the famous one-armed swordsman kind of thing. He's the guy who defeated the long-armed devil. You know, he's kind of a legacy reigns from that first movie, and people want to challenge him and people want to take him on. Even though in the first movie, and even this one, for a good portion of it anyway, it's very much don't get involved, it's enough to do with you kind of thing, and it doesn't go the way that I thought it would do kind of thing. And yet again, I'm surprised by the film's choice in terms of kind of cinematography. I'm surprised by the kind of some of the story decisions. The balance between the story and the action is very interesting. Sometimes now and again it does overspill one another, sometimes a little bit too much story, sometimes a little bit too much action, the action goes on a little bit too long. But I like the idea that the reasons for him getting involved aren't as typical, because I thought they might go a certain way. You know, you're doing the kind of the legacy kind of the myth kind of angle towards the character, and I really like the first portion of the film. Really sets up the entire movie really, really well, and I think it establishes the one-armed swordsman, his kind of viewpoint, where he is at this point kind of thing, and you know, shows his kind of viewpoint of the whole situation, and doesn't want to be involved in terms of the good clans and the bad guys kind of thing that kind of constantly keep taunting him kind of thing. He respectfully declines both. Very unique, very kind of distinct kind of series of clan groups that have different types of styles. Some have these kind of weird kind of chain knives kind of thing that are really vicious and nasty, and all get implemented, all get used for the other clans, and they all get very viciously and very violently killed. And that's the one aspect of the film I think is definitely stepped up, because this film is bloody as hell. This film has a lot of violence, has a lot of nasty kills, various kind of different variations, kind of weapons and sneaky types of kills kind of thing for various kind of characters. Like I said, the woman with the 1,000 knives, I think her name was 1,000 knives, kind of, you know, I think the 8th dragon. I think there's the poison dragon in the film that has this kind of really strange knife that shoots out poison gas, but also shoots out these kind of mini pellets, like almost like a gun in a weird way. It's just pretty crazy. Kind of spear weapons. There's just all sorts of crazy kind of weaponry, and you know, crazy villains in the film, which I think is so entertaining, so fun, and it definitely kind of keeps it fresh and keeps it entertaining. Sometimes the fights do go on a little longer than it should be, or I don't think they're well as choreographed as they could be kind of thing, but it definitely makes up with the fact of the body count and, you know, how badass some of the sequences are. And obviously once the one swordsman's involved, his fight sequences are absolutely hilarious and really kick-ass. There's bamboo kills, there's even a bit where he's literally like, you know, taking on people with a bloody stick. He doesn't even want to use his weapon. Definitely has some vulnerability in places with the conversations he has with the kind of other troops, the other clans, he definitely with his wife kind of thing. The stakes get higher as the film goes along, but I like what this film tries to tackle, and it's a nice continuation of the character from the first movie in the sense of he doesn't want to do this anymore, and what is the point of all this bloodshed, all these bodies. And there's a good moment in the film where he's literally looking at all these bodies he's literally destroyed, literally, or be responsible for. And it's like, you know, was that worth it? Was the cost so? Why was the cost so high for peace, kind of thing? And I really like that idea, and the fact that he doesn't want this. You know, even though he is this good, he's this gifted, and he's this badass in a weird way, and he kind of enjoys in place, you can tell. But I don't think he likes the consequences of it. How he kind of deals with those kind of imagery in the film, which I think is nice. The film touches upon that because the body count is ridiculously high. I think the kills are so extreme, so nasty in some places. It's nice to have the character reflect on that in the film, even though it's being entertaining, even though it's being over the top and silly in places. It's definitely a film to kind of reflect on that idea, and I think it's nice that the film acknowledges that quite well. The Return of the One-Armed Swordsman is a very satisfying, very kind of blood-soaked, kind of vengeful kind of sequel. If you like your violence, if you like your wacky, kind of crafty, kind of Hong Kong weaponry, it's got a really entertaining, fun aspect to it. I think the story aspect is really satisfying. It's a nice continuation from the first movie. It doesn't do the traditional things that I would expect it would do. It doesn't cop out on certain things I expected it would do. It has a really good, grounded kind of base story and actual characters and actual stakes and drama that I actually got invested with. I was caring about these other clans and that kind of situation they're in and how they kind of get the kind of one-armed swordsman involved. I think that aspect is quite interesting, and how he sees this kind of war, legendary kind of one-armed swordsman, this kind of, you know, badass character that can do very extraordinary things. But yeah, he does not want this. He does not want this responsibility. He doesn't want the fame. He doesn't want to be honored as anything. So yeah, I really enjoyed The Return of the One-Armed Swordsman. It's a really fun sequel and a good continuation of the character, and I'm really looking forward to seeing, hopefully, a continuation of this version of the character. I don't know where it goes from this point onwards. I know it gets a little bit messy kind of thing within the timeline, but I'm looking forward to seeing the director's kind of third entry in this kind of trilogy, his kind of spiritual sequel slash kind of soft reboot. I'm looking forward to checking that out soon. So what are your thoughts and opinions, guys, on The Return of the One-Armed Swordsman? Please comment down below. What are your thoughts on the series in general? Which is your favourite? Which is your least favourite? Looking forward to seeing your thoughts and opinions on that, guys. Please comment down for discussion. So in the meantime, guys, Amphlett Reviews, signing out.